Study the pros. Everyone thinks it's a good idea, but few actually do it, and even fewer do it well. People end up making a lot of mistakes when they try it, but I think they just need a little guidance. Now, I really believe that it's just that easy, so I'm going to explain everything you need to know about studying the pros in just 10 minutes. Alright, buckle up. First and foremost, although not exactly a mistake, you need to have a clear starting point. You're studying because you're trying to learn. That could be to learn something new, or it could be to learn more about something you already know, sort of how to execute it better, or more about how it's used. Things like that. But let me be clear. I think it's much more useful to do that by watching educational videos, kind of like this one, before watching gameplay. Personally, I found a lot more success from getting a good starting point from a guide, and then watching pros to learn more about what it is in action, because it's easier to learn more about something you're already aware of than it is to discover it for the first time by watching gameplay. It's not impossible, you can learn everything you need to, but it's just a lot harder. So with that out of the way, the first real mistake people make when studying pros is to not really study at all. They just doom scroll until they see a thumbnail or a stream title that activates their neurons, so then they just stare at it like a toddler with Cocomelon or like an old person seeing someone with dyed hair. The problem is that watching isn't the same as studying. Here's a comparison that I think will make things clear. Imagine you're doing some sort of peer review, checking someone's essay for any mistakes. Now imagine that you did that just by flipping through each page without actually reading. Yeah, you might pick up some words, maybe even a phrase or two, but would you have the slightest idea what any of the essay is about? No, not at all. You need to actually read it, and you need to do more than that too. You have to scrutinize it because you're here to review it, not just read it. You need to do the same when studying pro gameplay. You need to watch carefully and pay attention and even rewind if you miss something. Really, even if you just need to see it for a second time in general. Pay close attention to the details, because those details hold everything you're trying to learn about. That close attention is especially important for the next mistake, which is not keeping track of context. You need to keep track of context because every decision that anyone makes ever is made within a specific context. If you don't do this, then you might fall victim to things like hindsight. The context holds the information that was available at the time. Anything revealed later has zero relevance to a decision that was made earlier. For example, imagine you're trying to leave a fight, and when you run, you end up running into another team. The fact that there was a team there doesn't necessarily mean that the decision to run that way was bad, or that the decision to leave the initial fight was bad. Now, there might be an argument that there should be a team where you're running to, but once again, that's dependent on context. With context, it might actually make zero sense at all for there to be a team over there. That's exactly why keeping track of context is so important. While you're trying to keep track of all that information that's in play, some decisions might not exactly make sense, and you can potentially fall victim to one of two mistakes. Well, I guess technically there's a world where you can make both, but that's kind of complicated. The point is that there are two mistakes here, but both are rooted in the same lack of recognition of human fallibility. In other words, more simple words, you need to remember that we're only human. We all make mistakes or have misunderstandings. If you don't recognize this, then you could be overconfident in your own understanding of the game. So what looks like a mistake to you is actually correct, but because you're missing something that you don't even know about yet, there's no sort of rules or logic inside your mental framework that account for that decision. For example, many players become too passive when learning positioning because they don't know how to approach fights yet. They don't understand everything that goes into pushing a team. So when they see a pro swing to clean up a fight, they just see the pros playing out in the open. They aren't aware of why it can be okay or even the correct decision to leave cover in that situation. That can lead to them coming to some bad conclusions, like the pro not knowing how to position, or arguably worse, they might start thinking that the pro is only winning fights because of their aim. I mean, I'm not gonna act like it doesn't help, but it's not all there is to it. On the other end, you might end up giving pros too much credit, and automatically accept everything that they do as being correct. But pros are human too. They make mistakes. The problem is that those mistakes might not always get them killed. Maybe the enemy team throws or the pro's teammates make up for their mistake. Really, this is gonna happen in your own gameplay as well. So how do you navigate this? How are you supposed to know which choices are mistakes and which are correct if you don't know the game yet? Well, there's actually a lot that goes into it, but a big part of it is, and something really many players don't do, is that you need to work with a large sample size. Watch as many different players as you can, and if you don't see basically everyone doing it, then yeah, you probably don't want to be doing it either. I guess hypothetically speaking, you could find someone that's just ahead of the game and they've figured out something that hardly anyone else is doing, but you don't know that yet, and you can always learn it later, and that's a lot better to, be late to a sort of secret sauce than it is to be an early adopter of a bad habit. The last sort of direct mistake is studying without purpose. This kind of ties back into the watching doesn't equal studying thing. Generally, you don't want to just try to break down everything. You should be more purposeful than that. It's not always wrong, but it's not usually what you want to do. Instead, you might try to study the way a specific IGL comms, or the way someone plays a specific legend, or how certain players navigate congested endgames. Or, something I think most people can relate to, you might study some movement players to try and figure out how they play zip building so well. And then within that, you look closely and study specific parts of that behavior. Oh, and that last example about zip buildings, yeah, that one's going to send you down a rabbit hole on its own, by the way. Yeah, you should be targeting something specific that contributes to your immediate weak points. And because of that, what you're watching out for will change as you improve. A Masters player doesn't need to pay attention to the absolute basics. Or at least they really should have their base fundamentals in order by now. But the lower ranks, well, they still have plenty to learn about all that. Advanced players have a lot to learn about nitpicky micro. But gold or plat players, they still need to learn positioning. That wraps up all the sort of direct mistakes that people make, but, there's still more to go over. What's the point in telling you everything you shouldn't do if I don't go into enough detail on what you should do? I think it's fair to say that you're going to be using two strategies. One for broader discovery, this is where you try to learn about broader concepts that you don't know about, and then the other where you sort of narrow in and focus on learning the specific details about one thing. The first goes as follows: pattern recognition, replication, comparison, and framework building. This is where you try to find consistent patterns and take note of consistent responses to certain situations. Then, when you play, you try to replicate them, and then you compare what happened in your gameplay to what you see in the pros. What went well, what went poorly, what you were able to replicate, and what you couldn't. Look for patterns between them and improve your understanding. Use that improved understanding to build a mental framework, a sort of guidelines for how to play, and then you can use the second strategy, think of it like a refinement mode, to expand on the comparison step, and that process is watch to study execution, compare to your own execution, and find the missing pieces. Now here you're watching to specifically study how something is executed, and then you simplify it down until it's something you can realistically try to replicate. It's not hard to add one new action or behavior into your gameplay, whereas trying to replicate the entirety of, say, how Zero finds Wraithport rotations, that's too much to try at once. But if you pick one simple thing that he does while rotating, and you try to replicate that, well, now that's very doable. And then you keep comparing your own attempts to replicate this new skill to the gameplay that you're referencing. And you do this in order to improve your own understanding and find what you're doing wrong, but also what you're doing right. If you end up having a hard time recognizing patterns, that's where educational content comes into play. People have walked this path before you. You don't have to find everything yourself. You can learn from educational content, attempt to replicate it, and then go back to studying pros to watch their execution of that theory that you just learned. And you still use the same refinement strategy as before. All you do is skip the discovery phase. Of course, from there you move into practice, but now we're getting into the weeds of overall learning, and I happen to already have a video on that, so I don't think there's much of a point in going over that again. I mean, do you really expect me to just throw that on the classroom TV or something? No, this isn't a movie day. Get your textbooks out. I don't think I can stress enough that the core principle is to work constructively, build one piece at a time. Use the studying process to refine the mental side of the game. You want to refine and build up off what you've already been learning instead of just bouncing around, because if you do that, then it'd be more accurate to say that you're building out laterally instead of building upwards off of your foundations. You can think about it like those old toy phone blocks that mysteriously disappeared from existence after 2009. You know the ones I'm talking about. You remember the flavor clear as day. I know you do. Those things, they needed all the support they could get. If the base was bad, then, well, a stray breeze would knock them over. Similarly, you need to develop a strong foundation for your gameplay, and then everything else has to be built off of that. If you look back at everything we've been over, then every mistake is something that gets in the way of you working constructively. I can give you all sorts of tips or strategies, but at the end of the day, you need to figure out how to build yourself up. And there's no video that can do that for you. But as long as you can do that, and you make sure to avoid every mistake we've been over, well then studying pros will become a lot easier and a lot more beneficial. I just want to say thank you for watching this far, and thank you everyone for the support in the last video. At the time of writing, it's nearly at 1,500 views. Nothing insane, but I'm glad to know that these types of videos, the ones I want to make, are reaching some sort of audience. I hope you find this video helpful, and if you did, make sure to leave a like. It costs you literally nothing, and it tells our supreme leader, the algorithm, that the video is good. If you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe. That is all.